You owe me. This house belongs to me now. Rachel's voice pierced the somber air, her words echoing off the walls of the funeral parlor. My son's casket hadn't even been lowered into the ground, and already she was staking her claim. The audacity, the sheer gall of it, left me breathless. Guests turned, their murmurs rising like a tide, eyes darting between us, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. My son, Michael, lay in his casket, and here she was, already staking her claim on what she believed was hers. I felt the room spin, the air thick with disbelief. Guests froze, their conversations halted mid-sentence, eyes darting between Rachel and me. Whispers began to swirl, like a storm gathering strength. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their hunger for drama. But all I could focus on was the burning sensation in my chest, a mix of grief, anger, and betrayal. How dare she? Rachel had always been a force to reckon with. From the moment she entered our lives, she exuded charm and sophistication, wrapping Michael around her finger with ease. I had my reservations, of course. There was something about her that felt off. But Michael was smitten, and I, wanting his happiness, chose to trust his judgment. Now, standing here, witnessing her true colors, I realized how blind love could make someone. This house was promised to us, Rachel continued, her voice unwavering. Michael and I discussed it. He wanted me to have it. I clenched my fists, trying to maintain composure. At his funeral, Rachel? Is this really the time? I asked, my voice trembling. She smirked, a cold, calculated expression that sent chills down my spine. The guests began to murmur louder, some shaking their heads, others pulling out their phones, capturing the spectacle. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and humiliated. But more than that, I felt a surge of determination. This was my home, the place where I raised my son, where memories of laughter and love resided. I wouldn't let her take that away from me. Not without a fight. Later that evening, as the house emptied and silence settled in, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of the day's events pressing down on me. The doorbell rang, breaking the stillness. I opened the door to find an envelope on the doorstep, no sender, just my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed message: check the insurance policy and don't trust Rachel. My heart raced. What did this mean? I rushed to Michael's study, rummaging through drawers and files until I found the insurance documents. As I read through them, a cold realization washed over me. The beneficiary had been changed recently, naming Rachel as the sole recipient. I remembered Michael mentioning wanting to update his policy, but he never said he had. Why would he do this without telling me? And why was Rachel so adamant about the house, green light coverage? Questions swirled in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Had Rachel manipulated Michael into changing his policy? Was there more to his sudden death than met the eye? I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sense of dread creeping in. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I decided to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind Rachel's intentions and Michael's untimely demise. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about justice for my son. The next morning, I contacted Michael's attorney, hoping to find clarity. He seemed surprised to hear from me, especially about the insurance policy. Michael had mentioned wanting to make changes, he said, but I wasn't aware he had finalized anything. This only deepened my suspicions. If the attorney wasn't involved, who facilitated the changes? And why? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I reached out to a private investigator, someone I trusted from a previous matter. I provided him with all the information I had, including the anonymous note and the updated insurance policy. He assured me he'd look into it and get back to me as soon as possible. In the meantime, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, though the weight of suspicion hung heavy over me. Every glance from Rachel, every word she spoke, felt laced with deceit. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something sinister. Days turned into weeks, and the investigator finally returned with findings that sent shivers down my spine. Rachel had a history of manipulative behavior, with previous relationships ending under mysterious circumstances. There were whispers of financial exploitation, of sudden deaths, and of beneficiaries changing hands. It became clear that Rachel was not the grieving widow she portrayed herself to be. She was a predator, and Michael had been her latest victim. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act swiftly to protect my son's legacy and ensure justice was served. I gathered all the evidence, including the investigator's report, the insurance documents, and testimonies from those who had encountered Rachel's deceit. I presented everything to the authorities, hoping they would see the pattern and take action. The process was slow, filled with bureaucratic hurdles and legal red tape, but I remained steadfast. I owed it to Michael to see this through. He deserved justice, and I wouldn't rest until Rachel was held accountable for her actions. This was no longer just a personal battle, it was a fight for truth and justice. As the investigation progressed, more damning evidence came to light. Financial records showed large sums of money transferred to accounts linked to Rachel shortly before Michael's death. Witnesses came forward, recalling conversations where Rachel expressed frustration with Michael and hinted at wanting to be free of him. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a chilling picture of premeditated betrayal. It was becoming increasingly evident that Michael's death was not a tragic accident but a calculated move by someone he trusted. The realization was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The day Rachel was arrested, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sorrow, and a deep sense of vindication. She was charged with multiple counts, including fraud and suspicion of foul play in Michael's death. As she was led away in handcuffs, our eyes met. There was no remorse in her gaze, only cold defiance. But I knew the truth was out, and justice was finally being served. Michael's voice, silenced too soon, was now being heard through the evidence and the unwavering pursuit of truth. In the aftermath, I took solace in preserving Michael's memory. I transformed our home into a sanctuary for those who had suffered similar betrayals, offering support and resources to help them heal. Through this endeavor, I found purpose and a way to honor my son's legacy. Rachel's actions had caused immense pain, but they also ignited a movement for justice and awareness. I often visit Michael's grave, sharing updates and seeking comfort. His spirit lives on, guiding me as I continue to fight for what's right. Reflecting on this journey, I realize the importance of trusting one's instincts and standing up against injustice. Rachel's facade was convincing, but beneath it lay a web of deceit. Michael's love for her blinded him to her true nature, a lesson that love should never come at the cost of one's well-being. Through resilience and determination, I turned tragedy into a mission for change. Michael's story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us to remain vigilant and to always seek the truth, no matter how painful it may be. In the end, justice prevailed, and love found a new purpose in advocacy and healing. It started like a movie. One of those stories you hear about someone falling in love at first sight, swept up in a whirlwind of charm and beauty that makes the rest of the world blur. That was how Michael described it, anyway. I remember the first time he brought Rachel home. She walked in like she belonged, like she'd always belonged, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Something about her smile was too perfect, her laugh too rehearsed, like every word out of her mouth had been rehearsed a dozen times. But Michael was glowing, and I told myself not to be the overbearing mother. I told myself to give her a chance. She was stunning, I'll give her that. Tall, graceful, the kind of woman who turned heads just by walking into a room. But it was more than that, she knew how to make people feel seen. She asked questions, leaned in when you spoke, made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. At dinner, she complimented my cooking, laughed at my jokes, even asked to see Michael's baby photos. I wanted to believe she was genuine. I tried to believe it. But the whole night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Like I was watching someone play a role, and I couldn't quite figure out who the real person underneath was. Within weeks, Michael was spending all his time with her. Calls home got shorter. Visits became rare. When he did stop by, Rachel was always with him, like an accessory he couldn't take off. I missed our late-night chats, the way we used to stay up talking about his dreams, his music, his life. That boy, my boy, started to vanish before my eyes. He'd smile less. He was quieter, distracted. He'd glance at Rachel before answering questions, like he was checking if it was okay to speak. I'd ask him how he was doing, and he'd say, fine, like he was reading it off a script. I remember one Sunday in particular. I made his favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary and lemon, mashed potatoes, those little green beans he used to love. He came in, sat at the table, and barely touched his plate. Rachel was texting the whole time. I asked him what was going on, and he just said, nothing, Mom. I'm just tired. He looked anything but tired. He looked scared. Nervous. Like he was walking on glass and afraid it would shatter under his feet. That's when I knew. That's when I realized I was losing him. Not to time. Not to growing up. But to her. I tried to talk to him, to pull him aside, just the two of us. I told him I was worried. I said I didn't trust her. He got defensive, more defensive than I'd ever seen him. He said I was being paranoid, controlling, that I didn't want him to be happy. I couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth. My son, the boy who used to tell me everything, now looked at me like I was the enemy. Rachel stood in the doorway, pretending not to listen, but I saw the smirk on her face when he walked away. That little smile that said, I've won. Their engagement came fast. Too fast. Just 3 months after they met. He proposed on a weekend trip to the coast, sent me a photo of the ring on her finger with a caption, I found the one. I stared at that picture for what felt like an hour. Her hand on his chest, both of them smiling, but his eyes weren't smiling. They looked tired. Hollow. I called him, tried to talk him out of it. He wouldn't hear it. You don't know her like I do, he said. She's everything I've ever wanted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg him to listen. But he'd already made up his mind. The wedding was small, tasteful, exactly the kind of elegant, soulless affair Rachel would plan. Her friends were there. Her family was there. Ours, barely. Michael insisted on paying for it himself, said they didn't want it to be a burden. But I knew better. Rachel didn't want us there. Not really. Not with our opinions, our questions, our doubts. During the ceremony, he looked like a man watching someone else live his life. Smiling on cue. Saying the words he was supposed to say. And I, sitting in the second row, clenched my hands together, whispering to myself, please, Michael. Don't disappear. And disappear he did. They moved across town, into a new apartment she picked out. He changed his phone number. Said it was because of work. But I knew. It was another wall she built between us. The Michael I knew, the boy I raised, began to fade more and more with each passing month. Calls were fewer and farther between. He stopped coming home for holidays. He stopped replying to texts. When I finally saw him again, months later, he'd lost weight. He looked pale. Empty. I asked him what was wrong, and he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing, Mom. Everything's great. There's nothing worse than knowing your child is in pain and being powerless to stop it. I wanted to drag him out of that house, to shake him and scream, wake up. She's draining the life out of you. But I knew that wouldn't work. I had already been shut out once. He had to see it for himself. And that's what broke me the most. Watching him shrink, watching him vanish, knowing I couldn't save him. I lost my son long before I buried him. I lost him the day he fell under her spell and forgot who he was. One afternoon, I got a call from his old friend, Alex. They hadn't spoken in months, but Alex had run into Michael by chance. Said he looked like a ghost. Said he tried to talk, but Rachel was hovering the entire time, correcting his answers, steering the conversation. Alex told me something that sent a chill through me. He said Michael looked scared to speak. Like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. That's when I knew. This wasn't just love gone sour. This was control. Manipulation. Abuse. I started writing letters. Letters I never sent. I wrote them every week. I told him I loved him. I told him I missed him. I told him I was still here. I didn't know if he'd ever see them, but I had to believe he would. It was the only thing that kept me going. I kept them in a box under my bed, praying that one day he'd find them and remember who he was. That he'd remember me. That he'd remember he wasn't alone. And then, one day, it happened. A neighbor of theirs called me. Said there had been shouting coming from their apartment. Said the police were called. I rushed over. By the time I got there, they were gone. But the door had been left ajar, and on the kitchen counter was a notebook. I recognized Michael's handwriting immediately. I don't know why it was there. Maybe he left it for me. Maybe it was a cry for help he never got to send. I took it home, heart pounding, and read every word. It was a journal. Fragments of thoughts. Fears. Regrets. He wrote about feeling trapped. About how Rachel monitored his every move, checked his phone, isolated him from his friends. He wrote about trying to leave, but every time he got close, she'd threaten to hurt herself. Or him. Or me. My hands trembled as I read those pages, each one more damning than the last. And then, on the final page, in bold, shaky handwriting, he wrote the words that changed everything. If anything happens to me, look at Rachel first. That sentence broke me. Not because it was a shock, I had suspected, but because it was the final confirmation. My son knew. He knew he was in danger. He knew she might be the one to end his life. And he still stayed. Out of fear. Out of love. Out of hope that things might get better. But they didn't. They got worse. And now he was gone. I held that journal to my chest and sobbed for hours. Not just for the son I'd lost, but for the pain he endured. The silence he carried. The love he was never given in return. Rachel didn't just steal his life. She stole his voice, his light, his will to fight. But she made one mistake. She underestimated me. She thought grief would silence me. That fear would stop me. That my love for him had died with him. But she was wrong. I had lost everything. And when you have nothing left to lose, you become unstoppable. This isn't just a story about a mother's heartbreak. It's a story about survival. About justice. About truth clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. And it started the moment I found that journal. The moment my son whispered through the pages, "Help me." And I swore, with every ounce of breath left in my body, I would. After the funeral, after the shouting, after Rachel's disgusting little performance in front of our friends and family, after all of it, the house was still. Still like the air before a thunderstorm. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The silence in the walls was unbearable, because I could still hear Michael's laugh echo through the halls if I stood still long enough. But the truth is, even in my grief, I couldn't stop thinking about that note. Check the insurance policy and don't trust Rachel. It burned a hole in my mind. I had brushed it off as paranoia, desperation, but no, someone sent that for a reason. And I was finally ready to face whatever that reason was. I went into Michael's old room, still untouched from the last time he stayed over before Rachel got her claws into him. His books were still on the shelf, his cologne still faint in the air, the bed made with the same blanket I'd bought him when he went off to college. I opened the drawers and began pulling out everything, old letters, receipts, cards from birthdays long forgotten. It was like looking at the layers of a life before it crumbled. At the very back of the drawer beneath a stack of photo albums, I found it. A small USB drive taped underneath, with the word insurance written on it in his handwriting. My hands started shaking. I didn't know what I was going to find on that drive, but I knew it would change everything. My heart pounded as I plugged it into my laptop. At first, just folders. One named Documents. Another called Recordings. I opened the recordings folder and the first file was labeled simply with a date, 2 months before Michael died. I pressed play. And there it was, her voice. Rachel. Sweet, syrupy, calculated. Michael, just do it. It's not a big deal. Everyone takes out life insurance when they get married. Then silence. Then Michael's voice, low, hesitant. But why such a high amount? Why now? And then her again, sharper this time, don't you trust me? You said you loved me. That phrase, you said you loved me, I must have heard it 100 times. It was her weapon of choice. The audio went on, and my stomach turned with every second. I could hear the shift in her tone, the way she manipulated him like a marionette. One moment pleading, the next threatening to leave, crying, then laughing like nothing happened. There were at least a dozen files, each one darker than the last. In one, she accused him of cheating just because he'd spent an hour talking to an old friend. In another, she was furious that he had spoken to me. You need to cut her off, she hissed. She doesn't want you to be happy. She wants to control you. Like always. The gaslighting was relentless. It didn't take long for the dots to start connecting. The life insurance policy had been updated just a few weeks before his death. The will had been changed even more recently, this time naming Rachel as the primary beneficiary, and removing me entirely. That wasn't just convenience. That was a strategy. A methodical, intentional plan. I knew in my gut that she had engineered this, and now I had proof that it wasn't just my imagination. Michael had been isolated, cornered, mentally broken down until he gave her what she wanted. And when she had everything in place, everything she needed, he was gone. But that wasn't all. In a separate folder titled Notes, Michael had saved screenshots of Rachel's emails. One in particular made my blood run cold. It was a message from a man named Victor, no last name, confirming a meeting at a downtown cafe. The subject line simply said, contract discussion. The date? 2 weeks before Michael died. I searched the name, the email, anything I could. What I found made my skin crawl. Victor wasn't just anybody. He was known in shady corners of the web as a fixer, someone people contacted to make problems disappear. Legal issues, debt, even people. I sat there in the dark, unable to move. I had walked into Michael's room looking for closure. What I found was a murder mystery unfolding right beneath my nose. Every file I opened was another stab to the heart. Every audio clip, another cry for help I had never heard in time. I felt guilt flood every inch of me. Why didn't I push harder? Why didn't I go to the police sooner? Why did I trust the system, the lies, her smile? I was supposed to protect him. But I had no idea what he was really up against. I reached out to David, an old friend of Michael's and a family friend who had known him since he was a boy. David had always been loyal, always around, the kind of friend who would drop everything to help. I told him what I found. He came over that same night. When I played the recordings, he closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh. He told me, he said softly. He told me he was scared of her. I looked at him in shock. Why didn't you say anything? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Because he begged me not to, David replied. He said if I told anyone, she'd ruin him. Or worse. That broke me. Michael had confided in someone. He had cried out in the only way he knew how, and it still wasn't enough. David told me about the last time they met, how Michael was pale and jittery, constantly checking over his shoulder. He said Rachel had started following him everywhere, even when he ran errands. He wasn't allowed to have friends over. His phone had a tracker on it. He said he didn't feel like a person anymore, David whispered. He said he felt like a possession. Something she owned. And now he was gone. My boy was gone, and he died feeling like no one could save him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. I wanted to look Rachel in the eyes and tell her I knew everything. But I couldn't, at least not yet. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof that even she couldn't weasel out of. So I kept digging. I went back into Michael's cloud storage, searching every folder, every old email. And then I found it. A deleted voicemail, buried in the trash folder, timestamped just 3 days before he died. The file had nearly been corrupted, but by some miracle, I was able to recover it. I pressed play and heard my son's voice. Shaky, panicked, broken. "Mom, it's me," he said. There was a long pause, and I could hear him crying softly. "I don't know what to do anymore. She's watching me all the time. I found out she met with someone. I think she's planning something. I think she's going to kill me." My heart stopped. "If anything happens to me, please know I didn't go willingly. Please. I love you. I'm sorry for everything." That was the moment I knew for certain. My son didn't die. He was hunted. He was stalked, manipulated, and executed like prey. Rachel had set the trap, waited patiently, and when everything was in place, she made her move. The police had called it an accident, said there was no foul play, that the cause of death was inconclusive. But now I had the missing piece. The evidence they had never seen. Or perhaps the evidence they chose to ignore. I backed up every file, every recording, every scrap of proof. I made copies and stored them in different places. Because I didn't trust the system to do what was right. I didn't trust anyone except myself anymore. I made a plan. I contacted a lawyer, one who specialized in wrongful death and criminal cases. I told him everything. And when I played the voicemail, I watched his face turn pale. "We have something here," he said. "We might finally have enough." Rachel had been walking around free, smug, untouched, living her life while my son lay in the ground. She thought she won. But she underestimated the one thing she couldn't control, me. I wasn't just grieving. I was fighting. And I wouldn't stop until her world crumbled the way she crumbled his. Justice wasn't going to come quietly. It was going to roar. And she was going to hear it from every corner of her perfectly constructed lie. Because now, I had Michael's voice. And it was time everyone else heard it too. I sat on the floor of Michael's childhood room, the same room I used to tiptoe into just to watch him sleep. He always slept with his fists curled, like he was ready to fight the world, even in his dreams. That night, I held one of his old sweatshirts against my chest, trying to catch the last bit of his scent. It didn't matter how many times I told myself to be strong, to keep going for his sake. I crumbled. I sobbed like a mother who'd lost not just her son, but every version of him she ever knew. The boy who ran to me with scraped knees. The teenager who fell asleep watching movies on the couch. The man who once held me and said, "You'll never lose me, Mom." I had lost all of them. My cries weren't gentle. They were loud, animalistic, the kind that rip your chest open. I cried until my throat burned and my ribs ached. I kept whispering his name, over and over, like maybe if I said it enough times he'd answer. I needed him to answer. I needed him to tell me that he knew I hadn't given up, that I was still fighting for him. Because I was. God knows I was. But nothing was working. I had taken the audio files, the journal entries, the voicemail, everything, to the police. I sat in their office, hands trembling, heart racing, expecting them to react with urgency. Instead, I was met with hesitation, bureaucracy, indifference dressed up as protocol. They nodded solemnly, jotted down notes, asked if the recordings had been doctored. They questioned the timeline, the legality of the evidence, whether or not Michael had been suicidal. They said Rachel had an airtight alibi. A dinner reservation with friends. Witnesses. Receipts. Pictures. It's not enough, they told me. We'll keep the case open, but unless something more definitive surfaces, there's nothing we can do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the desk and flip it over. I wanted to drag them to his grave and make them listen to that voicemail with their hands on the cold earth where he now lay. But all I could do was leave, hollow and furious. I drove home in silence. No music. No tears. Just that buzzing numbness that makes you feel like you're floating above your own body. I pulled into the driveway, saw Rachel's car parked across the street like a vulture circling, and nearly collapsed again. She didn't even have the decency to hide. She looked me dead in the eye and smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated. Just enough to say, "You can't touch me." That was the day I knew I wasn't dealing with a person, I was dealing with a monster. A monster with makeup, charm, and just enough polish to fool the world. But not me. Never me. That night, I had a flashback so vivid it felt like I was living it all over again. It was the last time I ever tried to get through to him. He had shown up at my house alone, something that had become rare. I made tea, sat him down, and begged him, to leave her. His cheek was bruised. His wrist had scratches. I asked him what happened, and he laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind you force when you're covering up pain. "It's fine," he said. "We just had a fight. It's not what you think. She's under stress. She loves me." I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. "She loves me, Mom. That's why she gets like this. She just doesn't want to lose me." I remember thinking, she already has. "She doesn't love you, Michael. She owns you." After that, he stopped coming around completely. Messages went unanswered. Birthdays passed without a call. It was like he had been wiped off the earth, except for the occasional staged photo on social media, always with captions like, "My king," or "So lucky to have you." Lies wrapped in filters and fake smiles. And I had to sit there and watch, powerless. I wanted to show the world what was really happening behind those photos. I wanted to scream, "This is abuse. This is manipulation. This is what dying slowly looks like." But no one wanted to hear it. Not until it was too late. Then Rachel took it a step further. She started telling people I was delusional. That I had always hated her. That I was trying to ruin her life out of jealousy. She went on social media and called me unstable, said I was harassing her, that I was obsessed. And people believed her. Some of our own relatives started to pull away, unsure of who to trust. She had poisoned the air, made everything murky and twisted, so even those who loved me began to doubt. I became the villain in the story she told. And Michael, he wasn't even around to defend me. That's what hurt the most. Then the letter came. Thick, official looking, delivered straight to my door like a dagger wrapped in legal language. An eviction notice. From my own house. The house Michael had grown up in. The house I had poured every part of myself into for over 20 years. Apparently, after Michael changed his will, Rachel had become the executor of his estate. And according to her lawyers, she was exercising her legal right to reclaim assets for future sale. Future sale. Like my memories, my photos, my dreams were just items in a spreadsheet. I stood there on the porch, letter in hand, mouth open in disbelief. I didn't even go inside. I sat on the steps and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried him. I wanted to die. That's the truth. I didn't want to fight anymore. I didn't want to breathe in a world where someone like Rachel could win. I felt like every piece of me had been taken. My son. My home. My dignity. My sanity. I didn't know who I was without him. I didn't know how to keep going. But then I remembered that last voicemail. The crack in his voice. The fear. The apology. And the plea, if anything happens to me, that's what pulled me off the floor. That's what got me back on my feet. I had promised him. And I wasn't going to break that promise. I drove to the cemetery the next morning. Alone. No flowers. No umbrella. Just raw, unfiltered pain. I walked straight to his grave, fell to my knees, and dug my hands into the cold dirt. I screamed his name. Over and over. I didn't care who heard me. Let them think I was crazy. I didn't care. I had lost everything, and there was only one thing left for me to do. I pressed my forehead to the stone and whispered through clenched teeth, "I will get justice for you. I swear it, Michael. I swear on every breath I have left." And in that moment, something changed. The pain didn't go away. But it turned into something else. Something harder. Something sharper. Something that couldn't be broken or manipulated or lied to. Rachel had taken my son. She had taken my home. But she hadn't taken my fire. And she hadn't seen the last of me. Not even close. Because the one thing stronger than a mother's grief is a mother's wrath. And Rachel had no idea just how far I was willing to go. The investigator called me late one night. I remember because I was still sitting on the couch with Michael's journal open in my lap like a sacred text. My hands were trembling before I even picked up the phone. He didn't say much at first, just asked if I was alone. When I told him yes, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. He had news. Big news. Rachel hadn't just disappeared into Michael's life out of nowhere. She had a history. A long, tangled web of lies and losses trailing behind her like blood in the water. Her name wasn't even Rachel, not her real one, anyway. It was something else entirely, something she buried when she changed her identity after her first husband died. Died under circumstances that were anything but natural. Her first marriage? Just like this one. Picture perfect from the outside. Engagement within months, wedding in 6. Same charm, same control, same pattern. And then, 2 years later, he was gone. Fell down a flight of stairs during a dinner party. Witnesses said it was an accident. Said he'd been drinking. But there was no alcohol in his system. Just bruises. Just inconsistencies. Just a wife who inherited everything and moved on like nothing happened. When the investigator told me all this, I couldn't breathe. Not really. I felt like I was choking on air. My son's death had always smelled wrong to me, like something rotten beneath the surface, and now here it was, proof that it wasn't just grief making me suspicious. That it wasn't just guilt or paranoia. That Rachel wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. She was a predator. And she had done this before. But the biggest punch to the gut came next. The investigator said he found something else. Something locked away in a storage unit Rachel never knew Michael kept. An old safe, hidden under a tarp in the back corner of the garage. Inside, among other things, was a sealed envelope addressed to me. No return address. Just my name scrawled across the front in Michael's handwriting. Inside was the original will. The one Rachel never wanted anyone to find. It named me as executor. It named me as sole beneficiary of the house, the savings, everything. Michael had signed it himself, notarized, witnessed. Rachel had forged a second will, one that conveniently left her everything and erased me completely. She must have known about the first one, tried to bury it, replace it, erase any trace of it. But Michael, my brave boy, he must have suspected too. Must have hidden it somewhere only I would look. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about love or money anymore. This was premeditated. This was calculated. Rachel had played the grieving widow, the heartbroken bride, while quietly lining up her escape plan. She had already put feelers out to real estate agents, already listed the house for sale without my consent. Already had buyers lined up, people ready to tear down the walls where Michael learned to walk, where we celebrated every birthday, where I held him as a baby and whispered dreams into his ears. I saw red. Not just anger, I mean full-body rage, the kind that makes you forget how to be polite, how to pretend. I called the lawyer immediately, sent over the original will, the recordings, the voicemail, everything. Within hours, the legal wheels started turning. Rachel could no longer touch the house. Any attempt to sell it was null and void. She had broken the law trying to steal what was never hers to begin with. And so, I went to confront her. She was in our driveway when I pulled up, standing by her car like she owned the place. She smiled when she saw me, that same fake, polished grin that used to make me nauseous. I stepped out of the car, and she leaned against her door like she was posing for a magazine cover. "Evelyn," she purred, "back to cause trouble again?" "No," I said, walking straight up to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet my eyes. "Back to take back what's mine." She blinked slowly, feigning confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You sold my house," I said. "You forged my son's will. You lied to everyone. You manipulated him until he didn't know who he was anymore." She laughed, cold and sharp. "You don't have any proof." "Oh, I do," I snapped. "More than you can ever erase." She flinched, just slightly, like I'd struck her. And in that moment, I saw it, the crack in her mask. The fear. The realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd met someone who wouldn't let her win. "I know about Daniel," I said softly. "Your first husband. I know what you did to him." Her face went white. Not the kind of white where you're shocked. The kind where you realize you've been caught. I took another step forward. "You buried your past like you buried my son." Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time since I met her, she looked genuinely afraid. And then, from behind me, a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "She did the same thing to my brother." We both turned. Standing there, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury, was a woman I didn't recognize. Late 30s, dark hair tied back, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. Her posture screamed defiance. "This is Evelyn, right?" she asked me, though her eyes never left Rachel. I nodded slowly. The woman smirked. "Good. Then you should hear this." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She flipped it open and handed me a stack of documents. Police reports. Court transcripts. Medical records. All of it pointing to Rachel. To Daniel's death. To the exact same pattern. She convinced him he was losing his mind, the woman said. Controlled who he talked to, what he did, where he went. Made him think he was going crazy. And when he tried to leave her, she made sure he never got the chance. She turned to Rachel now, pure hatred in her eyes. "I'm Claire," she said. "Daniel's sister. And I've been waiting 5 years to see you get what you deserve." Rachel finally spoke. "Claire, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand plenty," Claire snapped. "I understand that you ruined my family. I understand that you killed my brother and walked away smiling. And I understand that now, thanks to Evelyn, the world is finally going to know the truth." I stared at Claire, stunned. She looked like someone who had carried this weight for years, waiting for the right moment to set it down. And now, here she was, handing it to me like a gift. I looked back at Rachel, whose composure was crumbling faster than I thought possible. "I told you," I whispered. "You buried your past like you buried my son. But ghosts don't stay buried forever." Rachel's lips trembled. For the first time, she looked human. Not powerful. Not untouchable. Just scared. And I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. I didn't wait for the system to move. I made it move. The moment I had all the evidence backed up, stored in multiple places, and verified by my lawyer, I filed every charge I could. Fraud. Forgery. Tampering with legal documents. Unauthorized sale of property. And yes, suspicion of murder. I didn't care if they wouldn't call it that yet. I knew what it was. My son knew what it was. And now, so would everyone else. The press got wind of it within hours. Someone at the courthouse must have talked, Or maybe the universe just wanted her name dragged through the mud like she deserved. By morning, Rachel's face was on every news station, splashed across headlines like Black Widow Daughter-in-Law and Widow or Killer. Her carefully curated image cracked wide open. People who once praised her elegance, her poise, her beauty, they were now dissecting every detail, pointing out inconsistencies, revisiting every lie she ever told. And I watched it all unfold from my kitchen table, Michael's journal still open beside me, like he was sitting right there beside me, watching too. Her lawyer dropped her case within days. Said he couldn't represent someone who refused to take responsibility, who kept changing her story, who tried to manipulate him the same way she manipulated everyone else. She called me after that. Left a voicemail I never listened to. Probably full of lies, trying to twist things one last time. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I had already won. Not legally, not yet, but spiritually. Emotionally. She had lost control. And for someone like Rachel, that was the worst punishment of all. Then came the family. The ones who turned their backs on me. Who said I was overreacting, being dramatic, letting grief cloud my judgment. They came crawling back now, heads down, voices low, eyes full of shame. My sister, who once told me I was making it all up, sat on my porch steps and cried into her hands. I should have believed you, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't hug her. Not right away. But I did eventually. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth had finally broken through the silence. Rachel was arrested in front of her new apartment. Cameras caught everything, the cuffs snapping around her wrists, the stunned look on her face like she still thought she'd be let off with a warning. She looked straight into the camera as they led her away, searching for sympathy, for pity, for someone to rescue her. No one did. Not even her own mother. And when she passed me in the hallway outside the precinct, she tried to speak. Tried to whisper something cruel, something manipulative. But I cut her off before she could get a word out. I buried my son because of you, I said. Now you get to live knowing that. That night, I went to Michael's grave. Alone. Just like I always did. I brought fresh flowers, wiped the stone clean, and knelt beside it like I had done 100 times before. But this time, I didn't cry. This time, I felt something close to peace. Not complete. Not full. But enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to know justice was starting to take shape. I pressed my fingers to the cold granite and whispered, she's starting to pay. And somewhere deep inside, I knew he heard me. The courtroom was silent the moment I walked in. Silent like the space between heartbeats. Everyone turned. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras zoomed in. But I didn't see them. All I saw was Rachel, sitting at the defense table, wearing a designer suit like that could save her. Like fabric and makeup could erase the blood on her hands. She smiled at me. That same rehearsed smile she used to wear when Michael brought her home for dinner. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat down and waited for hell to begin. They started with fraud and forgery. The judge ruled we couldn't bring up the murder charges yet, not without a formal investigation. But we had enough. We had the original will. We had the forged version. We had the insurance policy changes. We had the recordings, every single one of them. When the prosecutor played the audio of Rachel manipulating Michael, gasps filled the room. You could hear people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Even the jury stiffened. And Rachel? She sat there, jaw clenched, lips pressed together, pretending it wasn't happening. But then I took the stand. That's when the air changed. That's when the room stopped being a courtroom and became something else entirely. A reckoning. A confession. A final goodbye. I told them everything. How I met Rachel. How she wrapped Michael around her finger. How he changed. How he disappeared. How I begged him to leave her. How he tried. How she wouldn't let him. I described the bruises, the fear in his voice, the isolation. I read from his journal. Every entry, every plea for help no one heard until it was too late. And then, I played the voicemail. The one where he begged me not to forget him. The one where he told me he was scared to die. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Not mine. Not the jurors. Not even the bailiffs. Except Rachel. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just stared at me like I had betrayed her. Like I was the villain in her twisted fantasy. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I owed Michael more than that. Then came the will. The real one. The one Rachel tried to bury. I stood, held the document in my hands, and read it aloud. Michael named me executor. Me. His mother. Not Rachel. Not some woman who wore love like a weapon. He trusted me. He loved me. And in front of a room full of strangers, I proved that beyond any doubt. And then, shock. The kind that silences a room instantly. Rachel's own mother took the stand. No one expected it. Not even me. But there she was, dressed in black, face lined with regret, voice trembling as she told the truth. About how Rachel had done the same thing before. With Daniel. With others. How she covered it up. How she helped. How she enabled her daughter's destruction. And how she had lived with that guilt for years. When she finished, she looked at me. Not Rachel. Me. And she whispered, "I'm sorry." Rachel screamed. She actually screamed. Called her mother a liar. Accused her of jealousy. Of betrayal. Of trying to destroy her. But no one believed her anymore. Not even her own flesh and blood. When the verdict came down, it was a landslide. Guilty. 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 Fraud. Obstruction. Conspiracy. More charges were pending, including the deaths of both Daniel and Michael. The house was mine again. Legally. Officially. Forever. And as the officers led Rachel away, she turned to me one last time. Through tears she hadn't earned, she shouted, "He loved me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because we both knew the truth. Love doesn't scream. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't kill. And Michael's love for me, his mother, was the only real thing left. Justice doesn't always come quickly. But when it does, it hits like thunder. Rachel is behind bars now. Locked away under a different name, hiding from the world that once adored her. Charges are still pending for Daniel's death, and I know it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out fully. She can't charm her way out of prison walls. She can't gaslight a cellmate. She can't rewrite history with a smile. As for me, I rebuilt. Not just my life, but something bigger than myself. I turned our home into a shelter for domestic abuse survivors. Men and women who have lived through the same nightmare Michael did. I named it after him. Michael's Sanctuary. A place where victims can heal. Where they're reminded that they're not alone. That love shouldn't hurt. That trust isn't weakness. That survival is strength. David, Michael's old friend, runs the place with me now. He's become more than just a business partner, he's family. Loyal to the end. Always showing up when it mattered most. He helps run support groups, coordinates volunteers, shares meals with the residents. Together, we make sure no one has to suffer in silence the way Michael did. People ask me how I found peace. I tell them I didn't. Not really. Peace is too quiet. What I found was purpose. A reason to wake up every morning. A mission worth fighting for. And every time someone walks through the doors of that shelter, looking lost, broken, afraid, that's when I feel Michael beside me. That's when I know he's still with me. Greed turns love into poison. That's the truth. That's the lesson here. Rachel didn't love Michael. She loved what he gave her. She loved control. She loved power. She loved the illusion of perfection. And she was willing to kill for it. But love isn't blind. It just sees what it wants to see. Until it's too late. Justice sees everything. I visit Michael's grave often. Sometimes I talk. Sometimes I sit in silence. Sometimes I cry. But more often than not, I just listen. I listen for his voice. For his laughter. For the boy who once ran into my arms without hesitation. And I remind him that I fought. That I won. That I honored him the only way I knew how. One day, I placed a framed photo of him on the desk in the shelter's main room. Smiling. Happy. Surrounded by hope. Next to it, I put a sign that reads, "This is a safe place." Because love should protect. Not destroy. And as the camera slowly zooms out, capturing that image, the photograph, the sign, the light streaming through the windows, it ends not with sadness, but with purpose. With healing. With justice. And with a mother's love that never fades.